Today's episode is jam-packed with useful information and actionable steps you can take if you experience Hashimoto-related hair loss. We'll talk about how Hashimoto causes hair loss, talk about the main causes of hair loss in Hashimoto's, and how to treat each one. Hello, thank you for listening to Thyroid Hair Loss Connection podcast, a science-based, honest, candid conversation about how your thyroid affects your hair. You will learn practical solutions to hair growth, healing your thyroid, and balancing hormones with holistic nutrition approach and the latest treatments. Your hosts, me, Nataliia Sanzo, a registered dietitian, aka Nashville thyroid expert, and Kimberly Vaughn, a board-certified trichologist, hair loss specialist, and coach. To stay up to date on the latest topics, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We also cannot do this without you. Send us a question to the link below and tune in each week for the answers. Now, let's head to the show. Hello, listeners. I hope you guys are having a productive day. And Kimberly and I are here to chat about thyroid disorder, hair loss, and what you can do about it. Kimberly, how are you doing today? And are you ready for this information-packed episode?
Oh, Nataliia, it's so nice to see you today.
You too.
Thank you for bringing me in on this because, that is the nature of our episodes, right? Mm-hmm. Is thyroid hair loss connection. And so you've brought up such a main point and such a main topic. I know I'm excited about hearing some of the options that you have for the listeners. And, just like my normal protocol, I'm sure I have a few questions for you. So
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, let's get to it. Now, I want to say that hair loss is one of the most concerning symptoms that my clients with Hashimoto's have to deal with. It right up there with weight gain and fatigue, of course. I get emails and questions about this topic on a weekly, if not actually daily basis. And before we dive into these four main causes, let's take just one minute to review how Hashimoto leads to hair loss, because it's important to understand or to have the foundation, right? So because Hashimoto is not only an autoimmune disease, it is a disease of thyroid gland. It can and does impact your hair, as Hashimoto ravages your thyroid gland, destroying it from the inside out. Your thyroid gland will eventually have problem producing enough thyroid hormone. And the results, you'll start experiencing the symptoms of hypothyroidism. As your thyroid levels fall, you will see changes in the quality and texture of your hair and may even experience hair loss. And that's why we're here. We're talking about it. This symptom is so common that as many as probably 60 to 70% of people with Hashimoto's will experiencing. That was my experience, and I'm kind of basing this podcast episode on a lot of what I have gone through and what my clients are going through. So the hair loss that is associated with Hashimoto's can range from mild, just noticing a few extra hairs coming out when you take a shower, to serious hair loss, which leads to thinning of the entire head. And that was in my case. While hair loss may not be the most, pressing symptom in terms of its impact on your overall health, but it is very important because it impacts, our psychological well-being. And that's exactly why we're talking about this subject in detail right now. So let's jump into talking about four main causes of Hashimoto's related hair loss and what you can do about them. So number one, it's of course decreased thyroid function, right? Just like I said, hypothyroidism sets in, your thyroid is no longer making thyroid hormone, so it affects your whole body. And hands down, the most common cause of hair loss experienced in Hashimoto's is due to decreased thyroid function. This hair loss is pretty straightforward, I think, and occurs because your body is not producing enough thyroid hormone, right? As the thyroid hormone levels fall from the damage to your thyroid gland and the cells, you will see a negative change in your hair. This cause of your hair loss is classified as telogen effluvium, and Kimberly loves that one. And it usually occurs over the entire head and can even impact other areas such as your eyebrows. And what this means is that if you have hair loss and Hashimoto's and you're losing hair all over your entire head, then it's probably telogen effluvium, and it's probably from your thyroid. So, understanding this type of hair loss is easy, but fixing it isn't. And that's why you have to go and see a professional like Kimberly, a certified trichologist, and work with a dietitian to fix and to improve your hair loss.
Nataliia,
Yes.
So let me just clarify a couple of things for our listeners. You summed this up perfectly, but for the listeners, I just want to bring up a couple of things. So you talked about telogen effluvium. So let's break it down just a little bit. So telogen effluvium is truly an aggressive form of hair loss. The phrase has been in the news all over Google, right? And all over social media a lot lately. The reason is because we've seen a lot more telogen effluvium cases. And the next phase of telogen effluvium is anagen effluvium, which is the phases of the hair growth cycle and when you're truly shedding those. But COVID-19, the pandemic, whether it's been from the actual autoimmune issues that have arose from the disease, whether it has been from the vaccinations that have caused a little havoc on our systems, we go through these phases. And so I love it that finally that term is becoming more of, I hate to say a household word, right? Mm-hmm. But it is in front now of everyone who is going through some form of hair loss. So that's number one that I wanted to talk about. Number two is that, yes, telogen effluvium is typically a diffused hair loss. So women and men can see this type of hair loss from the frontal hairline, the temples, all the way to the nape of the neck. Many times we'll have clients come in, and believe it or not, the hair loss actually starts at the nape. So when our listeners, if you have long hair, as Nataliia does, and you notice that the hair is thinning from, say, your collar down to the ends of your hair, and all of a sudden it's very straggly, it's breaking off, this can still be a form of telogen effluvium. So back to your point, there's so many areas that telogen really affects. And then the next is what's a phrase that's used a lot right now that I want our listeners to pay close attention to is the actual phrase of FPHL, which is the acronym for female pattern hair loss. And many times you will see this associated with telogen effluvium.
Okay, such a great point. Thank you for elaborating on it, because I hear this term all the time, but we really don't know what it is and where it even starts. We just think, oh, our hair is thinning, and that's all to it.
Right.
So, of course, there's much more to it than this. And, kind of going back to what we're talking about, that, of course, there are many ways we can treat telogen effluvium, but when it comes to low thyroid function, to treat that type of hair loss we have to address the low thyroid function, right? And for most people, this means using thyroid medication to boost our levels, right? And as we bring our levels up, we should see a reduction, hopefully, right? We should see a reduction in hair loss as well as improvement in hair quality.
Agreed, completely. 1 minute note, though, and you'll probably get into this later on in the episode, but this doesn't happen overnight. So as you've spoken so many times and so eloquently about how the thyroid function causes our bodies to really go through a suffering stage, and it takes months, sometimes years, for people to finally get the proper diagnosis. The issue is that many times the hair begins this telogen shed at a very low level. And then as the body starts to try to rebound or try to build itself back, even though the thyroid function is not functioning properly, the telogen effluvium shed spreads, and then it starts to exacerbate, and then it gets worse. So, for example, we had a client in yesterday, and she's been losing hair since, 4.5 months. And it's just gotten to where now she truly feels that she's lost 50% of the hair on her head. But it didn't just happen overnight. So for those listeners, pay very close attention to this, because when you start to see an aggressive shed, and if it doesn't seem to make sense to you, dig deeper. Look holistically, as we've spoken before, make sure those levels are checked correctly on your thyroid and your hormone so that you can dive in a little bit deeper and follow Natalia's advice here.
Absolutely. And you covered that point perfectly. And the only thing I want to add is, talking about checking the levels, checking your thyroid levels, and taking not only the right kind of medication, but also enough of it, or not too much of it. And a lot of people are trying to go this natural route, and I don't want to take medication. I'm so against it. But what we need to understand is that Hashimoto's, an autoimmune disease, is a progressive disease. We cannot stop that. We can put it in remission and slow down it, but eventually it will destroy every thyroid cell that is there and will no longer be able to produce thyroid hormones. So unfortunately, people with Hashimoto's have to take thyroid medication for the rest of their life, or our life. So it's important to kind of get over that idea, like do everything else that is natural, but medication, that's something you have to have, especially if you're trying to grow your hair.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. And I'm a believer and a follower and a taker.
Okay, Kimberly, let's talk about our second point. The second reason you may be experiencing Hashimoto hair loss is because you have another autoimmunity. If you think, if you think this does not relate to you, think twice and listen carefully. If you have one autoimmune disease, you're much more likely to get another. That's just how the statistics play out, unfortunately. And if you're someone listening to this podcast, you already have one strike against you because you have Hashimoto's. But in addition to Hashimoto's, you are more likely to develop other autoimmune diseases simply because you already have Hashimoto's. And one of those conditions that tend to pair very well with Hashimoto's is alopecia areata. And Kimberly, if you want to say anything about this very common type of hair loss, you're more than welcome to.
Oh, my goodness. This is such a complicated discussion. And there has been so many resources, so many clinical trials, and so many poor, sad individuals in the world that have experienced forms of alopecia areata, alopecia universalis, and alopecia totalis, all three forms of medical-related hair loss that are all stemmed from an autoimmune condition. We see patients who are in the office who range from 3 years old all the way to 40, 50, 60 years old, with first occurrences with alopecia areata. Many times this autoimmune condition form of hair loss can start on the head. It can also start on the body. So many times when we see the areata functions, we will find that it's very sparse, balding sections that the hair is removed in the arms, the face, or the scalp. When this happens, it's definitely a trigger for the individual to say, okay, what's going on, right? Many times they will dig into this, certainly checking online, seeing what there is available. But I really encourage them to look holistically and to make sure that you're diving as deeply as you can into all of the autoimmune conditions that are living in the system. Exactly to your point, because it is not a one-off. There is always multiple issues. again, I hate to bring up clients, but sometimes I think it really helps our listeners relate. We had a client in the other day, and the issue is so she started getting some of her hair back on the top of her head, but then she started losing it on her arms. And then her eyebrows had been growing great. Everything had been fine, even though she had lost all the hair on the top of her head. And then as the hair started growing back on the top of the head, the eyebrows started shedding. So it's just a crazy, crazy condition. There is some amazing new hope, though. There's some new medications that's on the market. One actually by the brand name of baricitinib, which was just approved by the FDA. There are a few side effects. It's very safe, however, and so I encourage any of the listeners to reach out to their dermatologist or trichologist to learn more about this opportunity. But yes, it's a holistic problem, and thyroid can certainly be the driver.
It is so exciting to hear that there is a new medication on the market that gives hope to people, in treatment. And of course, we can do topical, right? We can take supplements, the new medication, but there is also, we have to address immune system, right? Mm-hmm. Because these are autoimmune disease, right? That they affect, it's our overreactive immune system. And much like Hashimoto's, alopecia areata stems from an imbalance in your immune system. And if you can bring balance back to that system and cool down inflammation pathways, then you may be able to stop your own body from destroying your hair follicles, right?
Exactly.
Good news, right? So the good news is that the same treatments that you can use to balance your immune system for alopecia may also help in treating the autoimmune component of Hashimoto's as well.
Oh, exactly. You couldn't have said that better. And the other thing is, we talk about holistic health, right? And I mean that from the lowest level and deepest level of the blood all the way through your diet. And so the hair follicle tests that we perform really give a client indication on their diet. So we touch on that a little bit, but then we send our clients over to you. Mm-hmm. So how else can they balance this in their body?
Gosh, yeah, there's so many treatments, natural treatments, right, that may help balance immune functions, and they include removing inflammatory foods from your diet. And for most people, not for all, but for most people, it's gluten, dairy, soy, and I hate to say that, alcohol. And, it all depends what you drink and how much you drink, but we'll get into it at some other point. Of course, consuming whole foods or eating a whole food diet, optimizing your vitamin D levels and everything else, other micronutrients, taking anti-inflammatory supplements. And you and I, we believe in high quality supplements, taking also supplements that your immune system needs to function optimally. And one of the big ones is optimizing gut health, right? We did a whole episode, I believe it was episode number 11, that we talked how gut health affects hair health. So guys, make sure you go back and listen to it. Another way to optimize or balance your immune system is through fasting. Yes, fasting can be good for hypothyroidism. I said that. If you have any questions, please reach out directly to me. And lastly is the stress reduction. I mean, this one goes without any explanation. Cortisol affects so many systems in the body, including it influences autoimmunity, how it develops and how it progresses. And of course, it influences our hair health.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yes, for sure. And I would just add on the immunity side, we find that amino acids are just so impactful and so helpful for these individuals as bringing down that inflammation. When we perform a trichoscope and we can see the inflammation right at the surface of that scalp, we know that the body is just trying to force that through the system, right? And get that out. And so we can only imagine how much inflammatory responses are going on inside the cells.
Kimberly, this is such a good point. Amino acids are very important, not only for hair growth, but also for our thyroid. And I think we have to address or dedicate more time to this topic maybe on our next podcast. But to kind of not only summarize, but give you the last point, guys, if you have alopecia areata, then taking thyroid medication will not reverse your hair loss. You have to address all those points that we mentioned about the inflammatory foods, optimizing your micronutrient levels, taking proper supplements, stress reduction, and all that stuff. Okay, let's talk about the third reason you may be experiencing Hashimoto hair loss. It's because of your hormone balance or imbalance, I should say. Hormone imbalance in your sex hormones can also result in hair loss. This category really goes hand in hand with androgenic alopecia, which results from changes to your testosterone level. Why people with Hashimoto's prone to experiencing this type of hair loss is because our thyroid helps to regulate many important hormone systems, including testosterone. And women who have Hashimoto's are at increased risk of developing issues with testosterone level, as well as testosterone metabolism, both of which may contribute to this type of hair loss. And of course, in addition to testosterone, we have to talk about estrogen and progesterone, which play an important role in hair growth and hair loss. And much like testosterone, Hashimoto's can also cause low or high levels of either of these hormones, estrogen or progesterone. So it's like a cocktail of stuff, like one thing leads to another and one thing causes, another. But the good news is that fixing these hormones imbalances usually starts by fixing your thyroid, right? Because that's kind of the driving force. And as you improve thyroid function, you should see improvement in your sex hormones level as well. Now, this assumes, though, that you don't have other conditions on top of your Hashimoto's, such as PCOS. And we do need to invite a PCOS dietitians on this podcast because it is a complex issue that we need to address.
So, Nataliia, I'm going to back up just a little bit and ask or clarify, I think. So, you had shared with me once before about the thyroid being one of our hormones, correct?
Thyroid hormones, yes.
The thyroid hormones, yes. And so when we talk about hormone balance or hormone imbalance, and we talk specifically, or I'm going to talk specifically about testosterone, what can someone do if their testosterone levels are too high or too low from a diet perspective? We talk all the time to our clients about how to lower these levels, and we have certain supplementations that we can use. But I'm curious, and I honestly, I don't think we've ever talked about this. So maybe our listeners would love to hear.
Yes, unfortunately, there is not much I can say. If you Google how to lower testosterone naturally, foods to eat, there's honestly not an amount of food you can eat to lower the testosterone levels of people that come to see us. Because usually we're talking about double or triple fold increase in testosterone or decrease. So if your testosterone is slightly elevated or, yes, there are things you can do and eat, and supplements actually has been proven to be very, very effective. Like Avasitol, it's inositol supplements. It actually decreases testosterone much more than any food can. And I would not advise somebody to start eating 2 avocados a day to just increase or decrease testosterone. That's just not sustainable. And if it doesn't bring the results that you want, why even address that?
Right. Well, and I know that we treat quite a few men who will come in and say, my testosterone levels were really low. So I decided to help myself. And I'm like, help yourself. Let's see, what does that mean? So that ranges from supplementation that they've chosen, or it ranges from injections, or it ranges from talking, to a urologist about getting the testosterone levels raised. The big key I want everyone to understand is it's not about how high your T levels are or how low your T levels are. It's about all of the hormones that you just discussed. So your testosterone, your estrogen, your progesterone, all of those need to be in a lovely similar balance for this to truly make a difference, I feel, in our clients when we're seeing hair loss with high T levels. Because if they only lower their testosterone levels, if they haven't checked their estrogen, their progesterone levels, they haven't checked their LH or their DHEA, then what's happening there, right? So It is totally a combination approach in how to look at this.
Exactly. And then you have estrogen dominance. If you lower your testosterone without changing the other hormones. So you're looking at the different kind of imbalance that, guess what? It's going to lead to hair loss. There's no way around it. And guys, like we said, you have to get them tested. Don't think that you have estrogen dominance because of 2 symptoms you've Googled on the internet. Get them tested. Ask your doctor to order, the test, like your free testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, all of that. If your doctor cannot order them or for whatever reason, you can visit my website at www.allpurposenutrition.com/resources and order your own lab work. So don't wait, don't guess, get them tested.
Right. Oh, great point. Excellent.
Okay, Kimberly, let's talk about the last point about why we're experiencing hair loss with Hashimoto. And that's because we have nutrient deficiencies. We cannot talk about Hashimoto's without talking about nutrient deficiencies, right? Studies show that Hashimoto's may lead to nutrient deficiencies due to low stomach acid and poor nutrient absorption in the gut. It is very, very common for people with Hashimoto's to experience multiple nutrient deficiencies, including some nutrients that may impact your hair health and lead to hair loss. Even though these nutrient deficiencies are common, it's not common that they would cause hair loss all by themselves, though. Instead, they are more likely to be contributing to your hair loss in conjunction with one of the other 3 causes that we already mentioned, right? And this whole podcast is built on. While nutrient deficiencies certainly can cause hair loss by themselves, when I work with my clients, I find that they more frequently limit how well your hair responds to the treatment we have already discussed. And because of this, it's almost always a good idea to check on some basic nutrient levels and use some basic supplements when you're trying to regrow your hair. And some of the more or most important hair regrowth nutrients include, of course, iron and ferritin. Iron is probably the most important one when it comes to hair growth, and it's been shown that a certain amount of iron is required in order for your hair to grow. We also know that patients with Hashimoto's are at increased risk for developing iron deficiencies for a number of reasons. Because of this, make sure to check your ferritin level, which is a marker for iron storage, and to see if you need an iron supplement. And just for reference, the optimal range for ferritin is somewhere around 40 and 70. And there was a study done that showed that healthy women who do not have any issues with hair loss have a ferritin level of around 77. I thought that was a very interesting point. So make sure that your number, not only that you don't just have deficiencies, that your number is somewhere close to 77, which is optimal. Next one is zinc and selenium. And we have discussed the benefits of zinc and selenium for thyroid function in other episodes, but it is also turns out that there are important cofactors that required for hair growth. And when you consider that taking these supplements can also help lower your thyroid antibody, normalize your immune system, and improve your hair quality, they become kind of a no-brainer, right? To take for the most thyroid patients. And for these reasons, and many other, of course, I recommend zinc and selenium to many of my clients. And unlike iron, you don't automatically need to test your levels before using these supplements because they're quite safe and often very effective for most of thyroid patients that experience hair loss.
Yes, and I'm just going to jump in here. I'm sorry, I don't know how many more you have on your list, but a couple of things I want to add about ferritin. So we find many times that iron levels in our, let me back up. So with HPI Hair Partners, we will always start with labs. And one of the areas that we find that many times we have to request to have redrawn or drawn is actually the levels of these trace minerals and metals in addition to the vitamins. And what we do see a lot of is that zinc levels can be low. Also, iron can be high at times, but ferritin levels can be low. As to your point about the storage. So, I think individuals need to understand that if you've ever been anemic, you'd certainly need to take a look at this and dive in deeper. Secondly, if you do have iron run, and many times, general practitioners will run this in traditional labs. But if you go a little deeper and you see that the ferritin is low, you certainly want to dive into this and take a look, obviously, if you're having thyroid issues. But one of the things that we've recommended many times is just upping your vitamin C intake, because that will help the ferritin and help the iron process and assimilate through the body a little bit better. And that's certainly easy enough to do. And certainly we all know vitamin C is very good for us and very safe because it's water soluble. So all of those are great. Hopefully, our listeners are understanding a little bit about iron, ferritin, the importance of zinc and selenium that you're sharing.
Absolutely. And I think another one that we should talk about is vitamin B12. Of course, there are many more nutrients that are important for hair growth, but I think vitamin B12 or B vitamins are very important to mention right now because they are important for hair growth. And another set of nutrients that people with Hashimoto's frequently don't get enough of. That's why I want to bring it up. If you're someone who knows that they have a B12 deficiency, or if you're someone who felt better using B12, then you may want to consider taking a B complex to make sure that all of your B levels are optimized. Because, for example, biotin is a vitamin B, but it's B7, it's not B12. So make sure that you're taking a B complex. It's often placed in hair regrowth supplements. So
It is, but I'm like dying to jump in here.
Do it now before it's too late.
So yes, on the B complex. It's so important. And the other thing I want to bring up, if individuals are not sure if they have a thyroid disorder, but you're feeling fatigued and you're really tired and you just can't seem to get it going all day long, right? I mean, you hit a wall at noon or you hit it at 2 or 3 or 4. Many times these B levels are just plummeted. I mean, they're lower than low. And similar to the ferritin levels that you talked about, I was so glad you brought that point up about healthy women that are in a mid-stage with no underlying issues. Their ferritin levels are above that high range, which is what I love to see because, we talk about optimal levels all the time. And that's so important. So yes, Bs of all sorts. So jump on that B complex train. It's really important.
Absolutely. Okay, Kimberly, I think we gave our listeners a lot to think about and to consider. And it was such a great episode full of useful information and I think actionable steps that our listeners can take to manage Hashimoto's related hair loss or, thyroid related hair loss period. If you guys learned learned anything or something new today, please consider leaving a rating and a review for this show so we can continue doing these episodes for you for free. Thank you for being a part of Thyroid Hair Loss community and have a great day.
Thanks, Nataliia.
Bye.